What do people overlook about Webex meetings? Maybe for larger meetings, maybe even people that regularly use Webex. Well, hello and welcome to 5 cool engagement hacks. I don't know if it'll be 5 or it'll probably be more. 5 cool engagement hacks for larger Webex meetings. My name is Roger Corville, and I'm the head of strategy here at Virtual Venues. And normally about now, I would say, hey, we're the crew that has a combined 163 years of experience helping you reach your goals with really specific use cases matched with the platform that is right for you. And normally I would say, hey, today's not about us. And in a way, it's not. But it is about something that we do day in and day out. And I invited to the virtual stage here one of our program managers, Ian Levenstein, to talk about a platform that he spends a lot of time in, which is Webex Meetings. Over the years, Ian has worked with clients like PNC Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Horizon SC Media, whole bunches of others. But more importantly, and probably a whole lot more fun, he co-produces a podcast called that talks about comics and other geeky stuff. Welcome, Ian. I'm so glad you took a little time to join us today.
My pleasure, Roger. Always happy to talk to you.
Hey, fill in a couple gaps. Tell us a little more about you and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Went to Brooklyn College. Majored in TV radio. That's how I managed to get this magical radio voice of mine all trained up and what have you. And then from there, work for a couple of different companies. I actually worked for Pokemon at one time. That's an interesting part of my backstory. But then got into webcasting from there. Started out as basically just tech support, and then from there built myself up into a project manager, and I've been doing this now for over 10 years. It's crazy how time flies, but yeah, it's been an interesting road to say the least.
Yeah, and you're still in Brooklyn, right?
I'm in the Bronx now, actually. So
Bronx, got it.
I'm in New York City. I've just migrated to the one borough that's actually attached to the mainland.
Well, for those of us here on the left coast, that's all east of the Rockies.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, somewhere over there. But you
Yeah.
know what? Ian's one of our entirely remote employees, which is actually most of our dozen or so crew here. So, um, unfortunately, I've never had the pleasure of shaking your hand. So, but today we're going to talk about something that Ian spends a lot of time in, which is Webex meetings. And maybe just to begin with, let's distinguish Webex meetings from Webex
hmm
webinars or Webex events, which is oftentimes something I know that personally when I work with somebody and I'll go, hey, which version of Webex do you have? They're like, it's just Webex. And they don't even realize that there are different ones that might be part of their use case. Tell us a little more about, at least from your perspective, Webex meetings versus Webex webinars versus Webex events.
hmm Sure. I think that WebEx meetings is a little bit more personable, honestly. One of the main differences between specifically WebEx meetings and WebEx webinars is that there's no separate participant list for WebEx meetings. Everybody's just in the call. You're not promoting somebody to be a panelist like you are in WebEx webinars. Um, and in that way it makes it more personable because you as a presenter just see the full list of everybody. It's a lot easier to, for example, use the raised hand function that way because uh, you know once you raise the hand, you immediately get boosted straight up and you see somebody there. And also, uh, personally, I look at WebEx webinars closer to a presentation platform, and WebEx meetings is a lot more of a communication platform. Uh, you can have the same amount of people on both, but because that participant list is separated in WebEx webinars, I don't really see it as a you're going to be talking to this person potentially on this call type of platform.
Right.
WebEx meetings, that is very much the case.
Right.
So that's, I think, probably the greatest distinction between those two there. And WebEx Events, the original version of that is actually being sunsetted. And now there's a whole new version of that, which is much more of a hybrid solution, way more robust with a whole bunch of more moving parts than WebEx Meetings has ever had.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, and probably useful to point out because Webex has been making some changes of late. In fact, Ian and I were talking about this, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks ago, where what was Webex Meetings and what was Webex Event Center, they renamed Webex Webinars because
Yep.
they kind of like co-opted that name event for the socio platform that they acquired, which was more like that multi-session, multi-day kind of conference platform, like what we
Yep.
often use Hopin for. But the meaning what they call Webex Webinars is more of that few to many kind of platform, much more that formal use case as opposed to that one that you're firing up day to day for a collaborative use case, which, frankly, most people do more meetings than they do presentations.
Sure.
That said, today we're really kind of focusing in on kind of like that use case of like, how do we use WebEx meetings, but when it's a larger meeting, then honestly,
Mhm.
that's one of the use cases that you spend a lot of time in, where someone has us come in and be that fail safe, that back end safety net and facilitator and producer. Um, just out of curiosity, before we get into like individual features and hacks, is there a particular way that you help clients that is your favorite thing to do? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, sure. Honestly, I think one of the more fun parts, specifically with WebEx, and I've run into this, especially with working with RBC as a client, is the back and forth of it all. Is that you're not just a silent partner in these type of events. When they need you to be called upon, you're there to assist with anybody who might be having technical difficulties, but also occasionally you know, you might all of a sudden get a presenter be like, "Oh, hey, Ian, what would you do in this situation?" And then you wind up coming back on mic, and then you wind up, giving your thoughts on it, just as if you were a participant in the event itself, which is
Right.
pretty cool to have that extra level of communication between the presenters that are going on there. Um, but also, I think one of the cool parts of it is just how robust the breakouts are inside of WebEx these days. They kind of took the bar that Zoom set on breakouts and wound up implementing that for WebEx meetings. Previously, with WebEx training, it was a very simple version of breakouts where if you were in them, you were in them, and if you weren't in them, you sure were not in them. There was no way to add people back in if they accidentally dropped. You'd have to do a whole bunch of different secret little hacks that I just learned over the years in order to boost somebody up to presenter access in order to get them back in. It was a pain. With WebEx meetings, you can, if somebody drops from the call, like if they have a technical issue, all you have to do is open up that breakouts tab and immediately put them back into the room that they were in, and right as rain. That's it.
Right.
No problems with that whatsoever. And breakouts have become honestly one of my favorite parts of the platform and of working with clients. Is that it's different every time. You can either pre-assign them, and then you're in there and you're working off of a pre-assigned list, or they're automatic. And WebEx does a great job of just automatically assigning people. Everybody who's either not a host or a co-host on the call will just automatically get assigned to a breakout depending on how many you choose, and then you go from there.
So, just in case someone isn't familiar with something like that, because to me,
Mhm.
honestly, that is one of the most powerful engagement tactics, in my humble opinion.
Yep.
Because to me, if there is a level of engagement that is often missing in virtual events that happen in in-person events, it's not just the interaction that happens between the audience and the presenters. It's
Hmm.
the interaction that happens between participants.
Right.
right? That's one of those, that peer to peer kind of connection is part of what we enjoy about going to an in person event. And,
Absolutely.
and that's one of the things that I have loved seeing WebEx develop. Um, and frankly, it took them a while, right? It was several years ago, they rewrote the code base from the
Oh yeah.
ground up, right?
Yep.
And WebEx Training Center was still on that legacy code base and kind of dragged on until it was a little long in the tooth. But yeah, WebEx meetings having those breakouts now is a beautiful thing. In fact, that is a great segue to just talking about some features for the sake of engagement in larger meetings. Just out of curiosity, do you recall the largest meeting or event you've done breakouts for?
Sure. I remember there was an event not too long ago with, I'd say, about at least 400 people, where we needed to put, if memory serves, it was something like 10 to 12 different breakout rooms, and then just having the automatic assignment place them in there. And that is something that I will mention, is that for these larger events, you're almost always going to want to go with automatic assignment, just because it does take a decent amount of time to set people up manually. So unless you have, like, 10, 20 minutes where your producer in the background, or whoever is doing that task,
Right,
is setting it up, you're going to want to go automatic, because automatic will just set up the breakouts with how many rooms you want. Bada bing, bada boom, it's all set up. If you're going
right,
off of set list, you need to manually assign them or load them in the WebEx ahead of time, and then you're hoping that all the people that you assign to those actually showed up to your meeting, and you don't have blank slots. So that's a whole other problem.
right. Well, and I know that's one of the things that you spend time working with clients on is thinking through some of the taking their children and getting and figuring out how we're going to go execute, right? Because one of the things
Yep.
that you can do in WebEx breakouts is upload a CSV in advance. But usually with larger meetings, you don't know exactly who's going to be there, or
Exactly.
your registrant list and your attend list may not be, perfectly contiguous. Therefore, you've got to figure out which of the ways that you're going to execute is going to
Yep.
maximize engagement and reduce the a level of risk or messing around. And honestly, particularly since I've got one client and we do breakouts, we do 3-day seminars,
Hmm.
and with tons of breakouts, that's one of the values of you as the producer, because
Yep.
often they want the presenters and or other facilitators to go into each of the breakouts to be part of facilitating the dialogue or what's going on there.
Hmm.
And meaning that they still need somebody to run the show or somebody logs in late or they got booted out and they're logging back in.
Yep.
That's when your value as the producer can help make that end user's experience seamless, instead of one of the presenters going, "Oh, now what happened? Now what do I do?
Well,
Julie just
and
dropped, and
I'll
now
tell
she
you,
came back in."
building off of that for a minute, Roger. One of the other cool things that I've done with breakouts with WebEx meetings is that, sometimes for the smaller meetings, and this is just, I emphasize the smaller meetings being like, maybe, I don't know, like 50 people or something like that, or possibly even 100. One of the cool things that we've done is that there have been meetings where, once breakouts start, I've then moved participants into other rooms while breakouts are happening, and they never even have to go back into the main room. You can just move people from room to room, so that if they were, it's almost like a meeting inside a meeting that way. Which is the cool thing about breakouts, is that if you want them to, have, two people staple in, breakout one, but then move everybody else in there at the breakout two, and then breakout two goes in the breakout one, that is something that you can do with WebEx meetings. And it's actually surprisingly easy and incredibly robust with the way that they built that out. So yeah, if you don't even want your participants to come back into the main for, a solid hour, and you've got 20-minute breakout sessions built where they're going from room to room, if you have the right producer on it, you can make that happen. And it's a pretty cool feature.
Right. And I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about the possibilities because I mean, October is going to be 24 years in this space for me, and
Mhm.
I'm just still want to throw up in the back of my throat a little bit when I think about how much info barf over PowerPoint still gets done as and called a webinar.
Yep.
Another tool, another tactic. You threw out this
Mhm.
informal polling using annotation tools. Talk to me.
Yep. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. RBC's almost entirely switched over to this outside of like a couple of the main polls. The built-in polling system with WebEx, I feel like, and I mean, again, I'm not behind the scenes, so I don't know this personally. I feel like they've de-emphasized that a little bit with WebEx meetings. With WebEx training, you could have, 4 or 5 polls loaded in.
Right.
They'd
In
be they'd be
in
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 there.
different formats like multiple choice,
Exactly.
free form text entry, etc. Yeah.
You got it, and they would all be loaded in, and then whoever had your host rights would then be able to then tab over to the next one, and then you know activate that, tab over to the next one, activate that. Inside of WebEx meetings, there are still polls, but you have to go one by one. You can't have multiple polls loaded in ahead of time, which can be a little bit cumbersome. But one of the cool ways of informal polling, if you're not looking for your full results after the fact, like if you're not looking to see like 22% of people answered this, 45% of people answered this, is to do an informal poll. And to do that, build into your slide deck, your uploaded PowerPoint, where you want people to put their check marks, and then you activate the annotation tools, and then people can just select the check mark on that annotation, and then place that directly whatever answer you give, and then you've got a real time appearance of what people have actually chosen based on those check marks, and you can
I,
work off of that, like, oh, it looks like 12 people agree with this here, but 7 people agree with that, and then you can save the deck afterwards. That WebEx does have the ability to save the deck, so if you want to save those annotations and look at them after the fact, there's you can certainly do so and reference that for a future webinar.
yeah, I love that. And when you get creative, I worked with a publisher once who did something like that where they put up, they were going out to their channel before the book got published, asking for feedback on which cover they liked best for this book, because they had mocked up several different covers
Hmm.
for the book coming up, and they put that up, which was a visual, right? So,
Yeah.
that doesn't work in a poll where it's like, select A, B, C, or D. They put up that and then used, in this case, did it in a smaller context, because at that time the platform didn't really support turning on annotations instantly for 100 people, but
Right.
it was a way to think about providing visual feedback that was different, and different is engaging. And I love that. Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
and I put you on the spot here, turning on annotations for everybody in the room and turning off annotations for everybody in the room, something
Hmm.
easy to do in WebEx?
It's easy enough. Yeah, it's
Okay.
basically just a permission set. So as long as you go into the attendee tools and you either select it or deselect it, it'll be there. It's not so easy with like if you only want like half your crew to be able to do it or half to do it. I wouldn't
Right.
say that's for you, but I also tend to keep them on all meeting because I, knock on wood when I say this, you don't really run into too many people who accidentally use it, on the wrong slide.
Yeah.
Uh, and it just makes more sense to keep it active throughout the meeting rather than go in there. But you can disable it if that is something that you do prefer, and it is just as easy as going to those permissions, going to participants, and then deselecting annotations, and then they just won't be able to use it after that.
Yeah, that used to be a lot more of an issue when conferencing platform literacy was much lower. Obviously, it has
Absolutely.
rocketed since COVID came around. Everybody had to, but it was kind of like, ooh, what's this? Bam. And it's like, next thing you know, the presenter's going, well, what the heck just happened?
And,
Why did that just show up on
I'll
my
tell you
slide?
what, the other the other thing too is that it is also pretty easy to clear annotations. If like the last thing, that eraser on the annotation bar, there's a drop down on it where you could either clear all annotations or you just hit the erase and it'll erase the most recent one on there. So there are plenty of ways to do that. And there's other ways to poll too outside of the built-in polling. Slido has further integration now with WebEx than it ever did before, where previously the only real way to share Slido would be for somebody to share their actual Slido screen and give out the code. Now there's actually, just like if the polling panel would show up in WebEx, if you have Slido, you can set it up where Slido shows up as a separate panel inside of WebEx, and you want your Slido, you want your polls there. You could have your Slido Q&A. You could have your Slido polling. Uh, just as easy as that on the right-hand side of your screen.
Oh, that's a great transition. So we'll
Yep.
talk about, say, another option, which, to be fair, doesn't get used, at least in my experience, as much in larger meeting or event settings as it does in smaller collaborative settings. But one of the things that WebEx has done, Adobe Connect really pioneered this, is the integration of other apps.
Yeah.
Right. And being able to extend functionality, right? For instance, in a larger meeting, you're not going to use, you're not going to go in with, when you got 300 people on the horn, and use a project management app that's integrated.
Right.
But you just mentioning Slido, just out of curiosity, is that one that are there others that you've used?
I haven't used any of the others. This is a more recent development with WebEx, so they're adding more and more apps every day.
Right.
And for a while there, Slido was just in beta. It came out of beta, I'd say maybe about half a year ago. And this is really the only one that I personally have had full use of on an event. And my only thing about that that I will mention is that the person who does set up the Slido and activates the Slido has to be the one with the account. So do keep that in mind. That whoever has the credentials for it is the one who's setting up the Slido app inside of there, and then you can launch your Slido whenever you want to after that. But that is one of the negatives of it. Otherwise, I'd say do it the old-fashioned way and just use the share to share the Slido screen, and that just works just as well. But I find it really awesome to just have it on the right-hand side there, where you could just activate it when you want it activated and disable it when you want it disabled. You've got your Q&A box there as well built into it, and it's a pretty simple task once it is actually activated by somebody who has access to the Slido account.
I think, and I realize that this is being a podcast, we're just talking about some of this and maybe verbally describing it. But I think if there is a lesson out of that, it's often that maybe the place to begin when you think about how do I really engage my audience and
Hmm.
create an experience, it's actually to come with ideas, as in,
Yeah.
hey, is this even possible? Right? Because
Yeah.
most of the time, at least as how virtual venues works, before you get to Ian, you're going to end up talking to Aaron, the co-founder and CEO, because there's only a dozen of us and we all answer the telephone.
Yep.
But working through ideas of how do we do this begins with an idea, right? As in, instead of saying, hey, how does instead of limiting how you think about engagement to either what you've seen in the past or how or you think WebEx or Zoom or Hopin or On24 work, is just to come going, hey, would it be possible if? And that actually is one of those places where, particularly after you develop a relationship with someone like Ian,
Yeah.
and you start to find those nuances, right? Oh, we just did 6 events. Oh, maybe we could try this time around. And next thing you know, those things start getting dialed in and it gets a whole lot richer than just talking over PowerPoint. So
And it's all trust, honestly, Roger. Like that's that's
yes,
that's that's part of it. Like I've gotten to the point now with some of my clients where, I know that I can suggest something, and because we have that connection and because we have that back and forth already existing, that they trust me and we can give it a shot. It's not like I'm afraid that, like, if I bring this up, they're going to be like, "Oh, well, I mean, have you tested it?" It's like, no, if I'm bringing it up, I've tested it, and that's part of the knowledge base. That's part of the trust, and that's part of getting to know a client, is to knowing when to broach a new suggestion or a new idea. And we've done that even with WebEx recently, where over the past couple of months, they've integrated share computer audio, which has been a feature inside of Zoom for forever now, that
right,
WebEx finally was able to implement. And now it's way easier for us to share videos inside of WebEx meetings than it ever was before. Before then, you had to quite literally load the file into WebEx meetings, and it had limitations.
right.
Anybody who was dialed in on a phone would not be able to hear the video as it was playing. Even if you were connected to the WebEx app with your phone, you'd have to unmute your computer, hear it on there, and then remute your computer and then go back to listening on the phone. With share computer audio, that's no longer the case. So you can just have your producer or your co-host or your host or what have you share their video directly from their computer, have that loaded in, click share computer audio before the share happens, and then everybody on the call hears it, no matter if they're on the phone, if they're on the computer. That limitation's no longer there. And when I broached that with my clients, they were like, "Sure, let's do it." And we made sure that the testing was done for them so that they were able to see it happen before we actually did it on an event, and it worked flawlessly, and we've been using it ever since.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and you used the magic word, which is T, the T
Yeah.
word, right? Trust.
Yep.
And that even came up implicitly a little earlier when you said, "Hey, we've got work with somebody where the presenter goes, hey, and what do you think?"
Yep.
Right? I've got clients who actually introduce me like alongside of the faculty because I'm part of the program
Yeah.
and a part of helping clients have that end user experience. And it's just a role, right?
Yep.
The presenters breathe more easily because they can throw something over the fence to me, and I'm not trying to be a presenter. My goal is to help them look good and or not have to worry about, oh, where was that button again? Just making it sure it happens. That's a
Yeah.
good transition maybe to one of the other points, because one of your hacks was being able to get around slide build limitations by
Yeah.
having, I'm going to have you cover that, but fair to say that was, well, tell me a little more about that before I go off on
Right.
WebEx's UCF file.
so, in the days of WebEx training and in the days of early WebEx meeting, one of the major limitations when you tried to load a slide deck in, and you'd see this alert, continue to see this alert every single time that you load a PowerPoint into WebEx. It'll tell you that unless you have a older version of Microsoft, I think it's like, maybe even like Microsoft, like not 98 or something like that, or 2000. Anything newer than that, the animations will not load in when you load a PowerPoint. And we've known about that here at V2 for years now. Our go around is to basically separate out the builds. So, like, if we're going to load it in, and it'll be a very rudimentary build because of that, but like if you want to have your bullet points show up as they would if we're loading in your PowerPoint, then slide 1 would be bullet point 1, slide 2 would be bullet point 2, with with bullet point 1 on it, so on and so forth, until you're done with your list and you move on to your next slide. With the sharing now, sharing inside of WebEx meetings has become robust enough where we can just have our presenter share their PowerPoint screen, and they go into presenter mode, and then they're sharing their PowerPoint with every single one of their builds, with every single one of their, added features inside of there. And the best part is now is that I didn't even mention this to you, Roger, but it came to me as you were mentioning this, is with share computer audio. If they were to enable that, they could even share a video inside of PowerPoint
Yeah.
and be able to just advance to that like anything else. And that's a feature that we've never had inside of WebEx until recently. And it's great. And even more cool is that there's even the ability to place a presenter in front of the screen that they're sharing.
Oh, before
So
we
if
get there though, let me share my favorite piece about the hack that you're talking about,
Yep,
or
yep.
not having to upload, because this is one of my pet peeves as a guy who has always actually pays money for my own fonts because I want my PowerPoint to look the way I want it, right?
Yep.
When you upload PowerPoint into a
Good
system,
point.
that conversion process only pulls stock fonts from the servers, meaning my font that I paid really good money for gets changed to Helvetica or
Yep.
or something like that. So that just always pissed me off. Okay, next great point.
Yeah.
You were going to say you can
Yeah,
overlay
yeah,
a
no.
speaker's webcam.
It's pretty awesome if you enable that. It's another little checkbox right there on the share, is that you could have the presenter uh, in the corner as they're doing their slide presentation. So they could have PowerPoint active and they're there on webcam directly in the corner of the share. They can drag themselves or make themselves bigger or smaller, however they would like. They have that ability, and they can place themselves wherever they want on that screen, and they'll be active as they're presenting, which is pretty awesome. And building off of what you just said, Roger, this also makes sharing things like Google Slides a lot easier, because talking about conversion, we know that not everything will convert properly over to a PPT uh, when you're building it off of Google Slides. So if you have a Google Slides presentation that you rather share, then inside of PowerPoint, that's another option there with Share.
Or frankly, Prezi, or one of
Hmm.
several others that you've never heard of, that some cloud-based presentation platform. But
Yep.
back to this idea of overlaying the presenter video.
Yeah.
Let's provide a verbal description for those that are listening
Hmm.
that might help create some distinction. Because every
Yeah.
platform on the planet, I could see somebody going, wait a minute, I'm looking at somebody's video, I'm looking at somebody's PowerPoint. How is this any different?
Right.
Right. So number one, it's over top, right?
Yes.
Meaning it can be kind of down in the lower left-hand corner or something like that. And the
Hmm.
second is that besides the presenter being able to drag it around, which is then seen by the audience, as in
Yeah.
changing the position, right?
Yep.
You could resize your own video.
Yep.
And this is me. Change gets attention, right? People's
Yeah.
reticular activating system starts to screen out anything that's the same.
Yep.
And yet if they all of a sudden saw your video, or your headshot being dragged across from the lower left-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner because you were repositioning it for the next section of your presentation,
Yep.
they're going to be going, holy crap, I've never seen that in Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. It's super cool. We have a presentation that we run where it's this guy talking about his like adventures in like the Adirondacks and stuff like that. All the mountain climbing adventures that he's had and what have you. And he'll be in the corner of the screen while he's showing these videos, and basically narrating his own videos, and it's really awesome, and it's a feature that I could definitely see people using for more presentation based performances inside of WebEx very,
Yes.
very easily.
Oh, but you know what? You just made me think of something else I hadn't thought about.
Yep.
Well, how many how many people listening to this have ever watched a reaction video on YouTube?
Mm.
Right.
Hmm.
So like one of
Hmm.
my favorites is this guy who's this like got perfect pitch. He's this classically trained guy, and he'll sit down and he'll play like a song from Rush or something like that. And he'll like, oh my gosh, and he'll stop the video and make a comment and then restart the video. And right, those are reaction videos. And if you don't know what
Hmm.
we're talking about, just go to YouTube and type reaction videos. And But you could do that in WebEx now in a whole new cool kind of way.
That's true. Yeah, it acts like a green screen when you think about it. It'll just take you and place it there, and yeah, the React acts very differently when you're right there reacting along with it. So it's video editing technology that people use, that pay all this extra for. If they already have a WebEx license or what have you, they could probably even wind up doing it right there in front of WebEx.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking about application for somebody like who might be a trainer. And
Sure.
if you wanted to combine pre-recorded video content that of, training video content with the ability to interact with that live and with your audience, you could put it up, play it for a piece, pause it, take a question, back it up. I mean, the nature of, I mean, those kinds of things just have not always been easy in a typical quote
Yeah,
unquote webinar, right?
absolutely. Yep,
That's a cool thing.
pretty
All
awesome.
right, so maybe getting a little closer to bringing the plane in for a landing. One of the things that Ian and I talked about a little earlier was streaming to Facebook.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is not yet a possibility for WebEx. Is that correct?
I believe not. Yeah, I personally have not really worked that much with streaming to other networks, but I know that that's stuff that they're adding in, especially with WebEx Events. And at least from what I've seen, if it gets added to a platform that WebEx owns, it usually eventually migrates its way over to other versions of WebEx. So I assume that all that stuff will be in the pipeline for one, and then eventually make its way over to the others.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, our clients tend to be mid and large corporate clients, right?
Yep.
So corporate clients typically aren't wanting to stream to Facebook
Yeah.
as opposed to LinkedIn, and I'm sure they will get there. But it is one of the things that is indicative of where these platforms are going, which is
Hmm.
now your ability to bypass a service like Restream and use this as your authoring platform. And now you take it and also engage audiences in other locations,
Yeah.
is one of the cool things that has evolved in the last couple of years, last few years in these platforms. Um, so let's talk about creating or taking that, what you're doing, and making it available for people after the event. And
Sure.
one of the points that you made was that you can record WebEx now in multiple layouts. Talk a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. So there's at least three different layout options for when you're sharing content, and then of course there's layout options for if you're not. If you're just in a meeting and you just have like 100 people on, you of course have the option, just like you do in Zoom, of like either showing just the people speaking as your layout, or quite literally everybody on the event, up to how many people can fit on the screen would show up in the recording. But with shared content, you have a lot more options than you used to. With WebEx, for a while, the only real way that you would get your video back would be the general layout of WebEx, and we're all probably, anybody who uses WebEx is familiar with it. Your
Right.
general layout is like where everybody's up on the top, and then the content underneath that. There's now focused content with active speaker as an option, which will then place whoever's speaking in your top right corner, and then anything that you're sharing is directly part of it, and you won't have anybody else that is on the call listed there. And then of course there's just focused content. So if you just want, the voice from beyond, and nobody visible, you could do that as well, and just have that as your recording. But another cool feature is if you're using sync to stage, which is a way of bringing in multiple videos to the side of whatever you're sharing, um, that will show up if you've selected that as a quote unquote override. then whatever you're synced will show in the video content. So if you have, your two presenters on the right hand side one to one, and you have the shared content directly to the left, that will show if you've selected that as your option. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to to use your content inside of WebEx, and then move it on as an MP4 after the fact if you want to upload it to YouTube or Facebook or other platforms, and have it be shared and have it look the way that you want it to look.
Yeah. And, I think, and I'd be curious to know if you've got a specific, well, an example or multiple examples.
Mhm.
I'll share with you one that comes to mind, just so that our listeners here can have an example of why or when you might want to do something like that, right? So
Yep.
what we were talking about earlier included lots of audience participation, because that's its own form of engagement, right? Peer-to-peer connection is a thing and it's important.
Yeah.
However, not you may or may not want that for a particular type of a program. So for instance, I worked with a client here recently where their paradigm was a lot more like high production television, in part because it was a product launch. So this wasn't about breakout rooms and helping people, connect and do Q&A and that. This was a really tightly scripted thing that went from this camera to this camera to this thing. And it was just like, it was really specific. And the end user's experience was highly produced, a lot more like television. And so the goal wasn't, how do we help everybody, all be interactive and go, oh, there's Roger in Portland and Ian in the Bronx. It was a lot more of like going, oh, wait a minute. This is going to be a really tight 30 minutes because it's a product launch and we got the CMO of the company on here doing some, right. And they wanted it to be a lot more like a television program and, bumper music and the whole caboodle. What you just described, Ian, is that set of tools that would allow for that, for you to bring out your TV production background and go, you want something that's a lot more formal as opposed to informal. And to me, I'm just highlighting that because there's probably this range of like, yeah, we really want people to connect with each other because that's how they feel like they had an experience. Whereas a different form of experience could be that they're totally formal, highly produced end of a scale. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I'll shut up. Any thoughts
Well,
on
well,
that?
and no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it does help with production value. And one thing that I've found, like if you're the producer and you're syncing your stage for everybody, y- as an audience, you as the producer have two options there too. You can stop people from moving that stage. So like if you always want people to see it one way,
Right.
as you're recording it, you can lock that stage so that that's the only way that they're going to see it. You could unlock it if you want them to have the option to move it any way that they would like. But if this is the way you want it to look, this is the way it's going to look. Um, and I will mention a limitation that we also mentioned earlier this week, Roger, is that if you're doing focused content with active speaker, you're going to have to remind whoever you're working with to keep that right hand corner bare, because that's where your speaker is going to live, is in that right hand corner. So if you have text or you have graphs or what have you, it's going to block that off, and it's going to affect your experience and your performance a little bit on that MP4 that you get after the fact. Which I'll also mention is full 1080p. So that is another just cool feature inside of WebEx, is that you're getting a full 1080p MP4 once you're all said and done.
But I've also seen people, and just to verbally describe, so imagine you're looking at somebody's PowerPoint slide and
Hmm.
Ian's beautiful mug is in the upper right hand corner. And that's what he's saying. Hey, that video is going to show up and it's going to cover up a little bit of the slide. But I've seen
Yeah.
people actually incorporate that, right? Instead of just design
Sure.
PowerPoint and
Yeah.
then go, oh crap, the video covers up some of our content, is actually to incorporate that, as in like, now put that inside of of a frame that looks like you're inside of an old television or something like that, and that actually can actually be a fun use of that video overlay function.
Absolutely.
Ian, any questions that I should have asked you that I haven't?
Not that I can think of. Though you know what, I'll mention something real quick, just to throw that out there as sort of a nice little capper to it all. Is you can insert multimedia inside of WebEx. Like that's another option. They have the ability to basically select multimedia, and then from there you put the link into what you want. So if you want like somebody to be able to watch a YouTube video while
Right.
they're in your WebEx, and you don't want to share it, you want them to just be able to have it as an option. The multimedia viewer makes that a possibility. But also, if you want to incorporate live captioning on your event, that's not automatic, because automatic captioning is a feature inside of WebEx that you can turn on or off. That's there. But if you're going to have like an actual captioner captioning your event, you can insert the link to wherever that captions are going to live inside of the multimedia viewer, and then that is going to be there for anybody who wants to open it up and be able to take a look at it. And you can also even pop that window out and move it anywhere within WebEx, make it bigger or smaller. So that's a pretty cool feature there. If you are planning on having live captioning or any other sort of media that you just want people to have access to, is that multimedia viewer. And it's something that I've used a couple times now, and it's worked pretty sweet.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point, because there is a time. I remember working with a client where the issue was that there was a really large all hands internal meeting, and because of the way their network worked, it was better for each individual participant to hit a link to a video that was hosted somewhere so they watched it locally, instead of trying to push a 300K HD stream out over their network and have 400 people in a department hit it all at once, which would bring their internal network to a standstill. So that is actually a great reason why sometimes Ian gets paid to do what Ian gets paid to do, which is to help you not have to think about those kinds of things. And of course, it's our honor to serve you if and when it makes sense to bring somebody in. And I'm just going to say this because this is the kind of thing that I can say that Ian can't say about himself. But one of the things that is beautiful to observe, working with a crew like here at V2, is that clients grow to love someone like Ian as an extension of their team. I don't have to worry about it because I know Ian has my back, and I trust that he's going to figure it out. He'll make it work, or he'll give me my options and let me know what the relative risk is for each of those options when I have some harebrained idea about how I can do something cool and different, because I'm tired of info barf over PowerPoint. So anyway, with that, Ian, thank you so much for spending a little time with us today and sharing some of your wisdom. I know we just scratched the surface of all the things that WebEx can do, and we didn't even talk about Webex Webinars or some of the other platforms that we can plug people into. If you're still listening to this, we really appreciate you spending a little time. Of course, you'll find our phone number all over our website at virtualvenues.com, and Aaron or somebody would be happy just to spend a little time on the horn with you, because as is our motto, our ethos here, we serve first and we worry about money second, because if you don't have a great event, we don't win if you don't win. With that, we thank you for tuning into this episode of V2's Thought Leader Conversations series, and we will see you